just to kind of start on a little bit of context, I talked with some of the other guys about kind of how leadership is structured within ShackTac. But I'm wondering, outside of missions and more in terms of the community, how you would kind of express that. Like, how is it designed? How is it arrayed?
Outside of actually playing the game, our leadership is more structured towards what people do from a community standpoint. So it's not, the rankings and such aren't military ranks. It's more about what your responsibilities are as community management. The in-game organization is very flexible, and the out-of-game stuff is primarily just so people know if you're brand new or you've been around for a while, or you're doing something administrative.
Right. I think as the way Chris put it, like, PFNG, I'm just trying to paraphrase him, he's almost the most like quote unquote restrictive it gets. And that's really just so you don't like accidentally blow up a bunch of your buddies and end their mission 5 minutes in.
Right. A pre-FNG in our structure is basically someone who's joined into the group in a probationary status, and we know a little bit about them, but we don't know how they play with others. We don't know any of their quirks or things of that nature. So it's just us having them in a kind of restricted setup to where they can't make mistakes that are beyond their grade, essentially. We kind of try to set them up for success in that way. And then if we have anything pop up that makes them seem like maybe they don't fit, then that's a good time to do that. But the new guy phase is actually two aspects. There's that, which is pre-FNG, and then there's someone who's decided they like what we do and we like them so far, and then they go on to an actual full-on FNG, which is still a restricted role, but not nearly as restricted.
This matches with what a lot of the other guys have said, which is, and I know this is really literally listed on your website, like skill has nothing to do with it. It's much more to do with personality and culture fit. How do you manage that? How do you maintain that in, gaming is like famous for its toxicity, right? How have you been able to cultivate that over time?
So toxicity is one of those things where over time, as you develop the community and you find the people who kind of resonate with you, you get this self-reinforcing thing where you have enough good people that even if you bring someone in who may not be perfectly aligned with how you guys view things or how you think or what your ethos is, the influence of that larger body of good people can tend to sway someone in that direction. So it's kind of a self-sustaining and self-reinforcing environment where we just have basic guidance of just be good people, be good to each other. It's not super complex. We don't have rules about don't do this and don't do that. Like, of course, we don't tell you don't be racist, because if you're racist, we don't want to give you a hint that we don't accept it. It should be obvious by how we conduct ourselves and the people we have within our community as to what our stance on that is. So if someone comes in and it's happened before, someone comes in and says something just completely inappropriate, the tolerance for that is completely zero. We don't have time for that. We don't want to try to change you if you're that far gone already.
Yeah, definitely, I don't know if you, maybe shepherd's the wrong word, but, just organizing a group of a couple hundred people all over the world, different backgrounds, different time zones, different kind of philosophies and like levels of experience within gaming. It just seems very like complicated. Is there like, do you think of like, is there like a type of person that you find like ends up coming to ShackTac, or is it really just kind of all sorts?
It's the kind of person that applies to us is just hugely varied. It's hard to kind of give common themes. One thing that I don't do, and I won't do here, is I don't say exactly what I'm looking for, because I don't want people to be able to game that system. But it's one of those things where when I see someone expressing certain views in a certain way with a certain passion, then it's obvious that that's a person that has a really good chance of fitting in, and I tend to select for that. But I would never say what exactly those things are. It's a thing that from the perspective of an applicant, the idea is that here's your first impression. Write me something that tells you why you should be part of us. And they do that, and some of them are good and some of them aren't. and it tells me enough to make that initial selection.
Great. So, you guys have been playing continuously for, many, many years at this point. Just imagine I don't understand Arma. Like, why do you play PvE? Like, isn't it like more serious and competitive if you're like fighting each other? I know you don't only play PvE, but like, why is that your preferred kind of format?
So historically, Shack has played a combination of adversarial and cooperative, or PvE. Over time, we got to a point in Arma 3 where, from my perspective, the adversarial environment, the gameplay, the situations we had, the community effect of that wasn't giving me what I wanted, and it wasn't having the influence upon the community that I wanted to see. So player versus player has certain limitations in what you can do that's fun for everyone. You're not going to see most types of vehicles because being an insurgent running around that gets hit by a hellfire out of nowhere isn't fun. So adversarial, the player versus player stuff, tended to be fairly restricted. You die, you're out of it. You have a 45-minute to an hour block of time. It becomes something that can be in many ways gamed, which requires a lot of developmental and organizational effort to prevent those from being negatively influences on the entire player base. Whereas cooperative stuff, PvE, you have the entire player base working together for a unified goal where you can bring in all the best aspects of Arma. So you can do the full combined arms experience. And you can do things like, if someone gets killed in a cheap way, you can reintegrate them into the battle later on. So from a player satisfaction standpoint, you're all in it together. You're all going to win together or lose together. Whereas adversarial splits that into roughly half of the community is going to have potentially a positive experience, and half's going to have potentially not as positive as an experience. So just from an overall, the standpoint of like overall happiness with a given session or a given mission, cooperative stuff tends to be significantly higher, at least these days.
Great. So, modability is obviously one of Arma's strengths as a platform. Can you give me a quick summary of what you've added or subtracted to the experience to kind of bring it into a shape that really suits the type of experience you're trying to create through mods?
So modability for Arma is an enormous topic. So I'll try to touch on different aspects of it.
Yeah.
You have the base game, the things you can configure by default. You have things like how name tags are presented, how the chat's presented, what the difficulty levels are, and stuff like that. The real fundamental things that's common to everyone. So there's aspects of that we make our own little changes to. Then on top of that, there's community contributions outside of our community, such as like Red Hammer's vehicles, or the different terrains that people have made, or Ace as a pretty robust mod with a lot of different features added to it. The level beyond that, this is much more personal, is the mods that are made within the community. So this is a really extensive amount of things. This starts with our mission framework, but it's far from just that. It's also all kinds of gameplay tweaks, all kinds of feature additions. For instance, one of the things that becomes a factor in this particular scenario is that we have a lot of movement, fatigue, and terrain-oriented things that don't exist in the default game. And as far as I know, some of these don't exist in any other mods.
Yeah.
So we have things like, in the context of a jungle environment, in default Arma, if you run around in the jungle, you go through bushes and stuff like they're not there, which means that they have very little significance aside from concealment. So for us, the movement in this environment would be influenced by a bunch of different things. It would be influenced by the fact that it's at points raining, which would slow down our movement very slightly. The speed at which we can go up different grades of terrain is much more restrictive than default Arma. Going through brush and stuff will make noise and slow you down. The way our fatigue works is different. And that's just, basically those little things are subtle aspects that add up to make this pretty unique experience. So you'll see in any of our videos, you'll notice that people will just naturally avoid trying to run through brush and trees and things like that, whereas in normal Arma, it just doesn't matter. So you find enough of these things, enough of these small features that add together that gives us this subtle flavor that when you go back to not having that is really remarkable. So we have things like that. We have things like some of the larger mods that I've done myself are our grenade system, which has been ported into Ace, as well as the night vision system, which has been ported into Ace. And those things are just like default Arma's night vision, for instance, is not terribly interesting. It's not simulated in any real deep way. It's just kind of a green, bright view.
Yeah.
So taking the principles of actual night vision and applying to that, we take an entire, half of the day mission environment and change it into something that's much more nuanced. Instead of it just being, well, we're playing a night mission, but it's basically daytime with a green filter. Now we have things like, it's raining, it's overcast, there's no moon, we can't see anything, and now all of our tactics have to be adjusted to factor that in. So anywhere where we can find something like that adds some kind of interesting complexity to it without being pedantic, those tend to be the focus of a lot of our modding efforts.
Yeah. It's texture. That matters a lot.
Certainly,
in the sandbox. Yeah. Terrific. Okay. Well, thanks for that overview. I think let's dig into the mission itself. So, obviously we're both familiar with what's happened in the mission and kind of the scenario itself, but how would you kind of break down the objective at kind of a briefing level? What was the setup of the mission?
So the mission basically started off as a defensive thing in which there were two squads which were split from each other, but not too far away. But in the jungle being, not too far away, kind of is far away. So there's this initial defensive phase that was on a timer under which we were being attacked, and within Alpha, the squad I was in, the visibility or awareness of what was happening with our sister squad, Bravo, was pretty low just because of how much chaos was going on. Mortars impacting, infantry rushing us, and people taking wounds and stuff. So that was a pretty lengthy phase that eventually became we'd accomplished our objective there, and it was time to withdraw. And then that was basically when everything went poorly in a great way.
In a very great way.
Yes.
And finally, just how would you kind of, you've played on so many different maps and environments, like how does this one kind of rate or rank, the weather conditions, the visibility? How do you kind of contextualize that?
Can I say something that we can check before you go to press? Because I want to tell you something about this map, but I want to make sure that it's good things can be said. Okay.
I understand fact checking. Yeah, of course.
Right. So
yeah, the
creator of this map actually works for Bohemia now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because this map, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, we call it PKL, is this fantastic Cambodian map that has just wonderful everything. It's extremely well done. It's a great jungle environment. It has this unique appeal to it. It's fantastic for any kind of Vietnam or Vietnam-esque scenarios, or Cambodia, of course. It's just a really great terrain. We've had a lot of fun with it since it came out.
Terrific. Yeah, it seems really challenging to fight on, and a lot of the guys definitely brought up the unique threats of being in the jungle and the uncertainty that it can foster.
Yeah.
So I've got some of this already from the other guys. You don't have to explain the whole philosophy of squad structure, but just briefly, if you could kind of give me an inventory of, there's Alpha, there's Bravo, how many people, who are the leaders? Just a quick summary of that would be really helpful.
Who are the leaders in this particular scenario?
I guess I'm sorry, I phrased that poorly. So just so we've got Alpha on one position, we've got Bravo in another, and then what are they comprised of? So how many fire teams? There's one squad leader per squad, right? And then how many medics, for example. So how would you as leader of Shack kind of take inventory of who's where and how many?
Okay. In this scenario, the organization is set up. It's our standard organization, which is a squad consists of 2 fire teams of 6 people each. And then there's a squad leader element, which is the squad leader and the squad medic. So every squad has 1 medic. Every squad has 2 fire teams, 2 fire team leaders, and 1 squad leader. In this structure, in this particular, at the start of the mission, the Alpha squad, which was what I was in, was with the platoon headquarters element, which was commanding the entire operation, which typically is a platoon commander who's in charge, a platoon sergeant who's their second in command, a platoon medic, and then a rifleman for security.
Thanks a lot. That was really tight. Terrific. Cool. So yes. So I mean, things are going well in that first defense until the mortars start falling, and even then, like it's not too bad. I mean, I guess Bravo takes a pretty serious hit, as some of the other guys recounted to me. But give me the kind of, I guess, from a objective standpoint, you finish downloading this data, and then you've got to get to some vehicles. So talk me through how that played out, how it was organized.
So one of the fun aspects of this scenario, and something that I just like to do in general, is that in this one I had no leadership responsibility. I was just a guy along for the ride. So my total awareness of what was happening to Bravo, it wasn't that high. All I really knew is that we were going to get some vehicles and get out of there. So when we arrived to get these vehicles, we discovered that things were pretty terrible, and the cohesion was rapidly being lost. One of the aspects of our medical system is, as people, and Arma medical systems in general, is as people get wounded, you have this increasing need to deal with them and tend to them, and it takes people off of security, and particularly when medics and stuff start getting hurt as well.
Yeah.
So things can very rapidly snowball, and this scenario ended up being basically that. We had quite a few people make it to the vehicle position, and then over the course of not terribly long, almost all of them were killed. It ended up being just myself, Chris, and Ghost Boots that got away.
Yeah. Yeah, the way Ghost Boots put it is, it was like, it's like the rug got pulled underneath you. You think you're getting rescued, mission complete or whatever, and then that happened.
Yeah, and just looking at I'm viewing the AAR at the same time, and the number of people that are dead in this very small area around the vehicles is quite high. It's like maybe 11 or 12 people. And that happened over the span of a few minutes.
Wow. So is that right then, that you probably would have started with about 16 people coming to that position after the initial defense whittled down to the three of you?
Probably about that. It was roughly a squad strength, with a few people from Bravo, the platoon headquarters element, and Alpha were the ones that all kind of got there.
So as you mentioned, you weren't a leadership figure at the beginning of this mission. Explain to me, if you can really kind of condense it, how the radio system works, like especially in comparison to like, Call of Duty or something. People have no sense of like, wait, like, so there's separate radios in your inventory. Like that's a really interesting system to tap into, and kind of what it means for your experience and the way information is exchanged.
Sure. So one of the best things that has ever happened to Arma as a series was the introduction of this radio mod known as Acre. The version we use is called Acre 2. There's a similar one that other communities use called Task Force Radio. Very similar concept, but I'll be talking about Acre. The basic idea is that you have several different methods of talking, and all of this is automated for us so that we don't have to sit there and tune our radios at the start of any given mission. You have the initial thing, which is the people just talking to each other directly. And you have a volume slider you can easily use to go to a shout, or to speak in a normal voice, or go to a whisper. And the AI will actually hear these different levels, and they'll react to it. That's the kind of thing you use for talking within your fire team. You can there's a guy next to you, you say something to them, they hear you, it's simple, unless there's gunfire, then it gets a little more complicated. Then you have we call it a 343. It's a PRC 343 radio. This is a shorter range one. It's not going to go more than 700 meters. And this is something that every squad has a channel on. So anyone within that squad, within those two fire teams and the squad leader element, can talk on that radio to talk exclusively to the people within their squad. When communication needs to happen at a higher level, like the platoon commander talking to his squad leaders, that happens on a 152, which is essentially a long-range radio. They can go for 10 to 20 kilometers. So the 152, that's a platoon net. This platoon commander gives his orders, the squad leaders can talk on it, the squad leaders can push things up from their squad that need to be heard by the platoon commander, or heard by other squads. When the squad leader needs to talk to his squad, he switches back to using that 343. So we just have different buttons for each of them. And it's very straightforward to pick up.
Right. And would you say that kind of, to a lay person, the whole reason for this in a game is sort of like, a need to know basis. Like not everyone needs to know everything. In fact, that might be dangerous and complicate the situation.
One of the aspects of using those sorts of radio nets is that the compartmentalization of information is necessary for something where you have so many people operating across such a relatively broad area where everyone has their own kind of local concerns. So there might be something that, and filtering that information both as a team leader and a squad leader and even a platoon commander is incredibly important. You need to be able to, as a leader, take what someone's saying to you and assess it yourself as to whether that needs to go higher up or not. And sometimes you might have someone who's, like if you're a squad leader and someone's a team leader, they might say, hey, hey, dslyecxi, tell the other squad that blah, blah, blah is happening. And I'll hear that, and I'll also know what's going on that platoon net and think, actually, no, they don't need to know that. They'll figure that out on their own. It's not important enough for me to break up the flow of the conversation that's currently happening. So there's just a great deal of stuff happening all at once. And if you had that all on one radio net, it would be madness.
Of course.
Oh, wait, so, actually, yeah. if you had that all on one radio net, it would be absolute madness.
There you go. Excellent. So yeah, coming back to the video then, I'm going to screen share just because I have it open. I know you've got it there too.
Sure.
So I'm at 2858 on your video. I just want to have, you've kind of been through this situation already. It's the three of you that I think are left, minus any other people who may or may not be, speaking of comms, bleeding out next to you. So at this point, you're prone on the ground behind one of the cars. I just want you to kind of give me a little bit of play-by-play or reaction to this moment, what you might be thinking. Yeah, I'm just going to let it play.
So in this kind of moment, what I have is an AR. I am the firepower of this reduced fire team. So my responsibility is to make sure I use that as best as possible to protect us. And since things are going straight to hell, all I can really do is just identify targets, search for them, shoot them, and then listen for what the leadership has to say, if there's even any leadership left.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the unique, I just love to have you reflect on it, like the character of Arma's enemy AI. I mean, obviously, like it can be quite dysfunctional, but it can really surprise you in moments like this. Is that fair to say?
Oh, certainly. The AI is another aspect where we've done a lot of modding over the years. So we have some things, it doesn't always work perfectly, and Arma's AI by itself doesn't always work perfectly. But we can get them to be extremely aggressive. A situation like this, you can have things pop out of the jungle. You can have a horde of people show up meters away that you never really saw coming. And then their accuracy and everything about them is quite challenging, especially in this kind of environment where you have such reduced sight lines, you have such poor visibility in general, and you're being overwhelmed from all directions without any real defenses to take advantage of, aside from getting behind a rather flimsy truck or whatever we want to call that thing.
So I think Ghost Boots used the term E&E. As you're getting out of here, it's just like, there's not like a concrete plan from his perspective anyway. You're just trying to leave.
Right.
I want to find this moment. Yeah, like I don't want to recite it too much back to you, but like, yeah, if we can just play from here and kind of get your reaction. Like, what is that flash that we see in a few seconds here?
Oh, so the flash you see there is a grenade, either one of ours or an AI throwing one at us. So we're basically running away and things are just going crazy. And then at some point during this, if I remember, I believe we start taking mortar fire as well.
That grenade seemed like it might have gone off like 10 feet away from me.
Well, as far as grenades go, one of the things that we've changed there is the default damage model in Arma is extremely severe. It's not terribly representative of what would actually happen. So we kind of err on the side of it being a little bit more forgiving, where our grenades do more wounding damage than they do fatal. If a grenade lands on you, you're probably dead. But if it's not directly on you, you're probably going to take shrapnel and you'll survive it, and now you become a casualty that has to be treated.
Yeah, we can see some other kind of 3 or 4 detonations going off here, if those are in fact grenades or mortars. And do you know where that purple smoke might have come from? Is that one of you guys?
Purple smoke is usually something that a medic will have. So either one of these guys is a medic that's with us, I forget exactly, or someone looted it from a medic. It's just someone throwing down smoke so that they can try to screen our withdrawal. In this kind of context, it's not super effective, but it's better than nothing. The main way of us, this kind of escape and evade tactic that we're using here, mostly is going to be about getting distance and putting foliage and stuff between us and the enemy. Smoke is such a short range thing that us continuing to run is going to cause the smoke to be irrelevant for us very rapidly. And particularly when there's enemy that are coming from a broad arc, that one piece of smoke is not going to do much against guys that come from the flank of that. It actually looks like the, if I remember, the vehicles are getting mortared as well, or destroyed somehow.
Yeah, I would love a little bit of a longer description of just like what's going on here.
From the mindset standpoint, the problem that we're running into here is that we have no plan of what exactly is going to happen next. All we can do is try to run away and come up with a plan as we go. So we have issues like the vehicles behind us are being destroyed. There's enemy coming from behind us. There may be a lot more. We have, jungle terrain that we have to move through, which is going to be pretty inhibiting. The weight of what we're carrying is going to encumber us and slow us down. The terrain itself is going to slow us down. If we take any wounds, we have to stop and treat them. And the medical supplies that we have are either extremely low or some have run out of them. So we're at a point where taking any additional hits is going to be debilitating. So the only real option we have is to try to shoot what we can and then move as fast as we can away from where we know the threat is, and hope that that direction is going to be something positive for us.
And what do we see here in this frame between the palm trees?
That is between the palm trees, you're seeing a vehicle potentially hit by a mortar or an RPG or something like that, exploding and flying into the air in an incredibly cinematic fashion.
No kidding.
It's most of the time that happens for the right reasons. Sometimes you get hilarious things, as anyone who's watched Arma videos knows, where a vehicle might decide to go to space because it just feels like it. But here it looks like it was an accurate thing that happened.
Fantastic. So, at this point, probably the next major event from my perspective, you guys come upon a medical crate, and I mean, that just seems like a guardian angel is looking over for you. You guys have used a lot of your supplies at that point, if I'm right. What's the first thing you're reaching for in a medical crate? And what is the kind of hierarchy of value there?
Well, first, you want me to tell you why that medical crate's there?
For sure.
So a huge part of any scenario that we play is the person that's acting as the game master during it, which typically is referred to as a Zeus. So in this case, they're orchestrating what's happening. They're making sure that it's fair. They're making sure that any issues that come up, they're able to address them. And when they see that we're running away on foot and they recognize that we have very limited medical, they've reinforced people who died earlier as a new squad, which is now acting as a rescue element. So that rescue element is getting an additional thing to do. They're getting something, more fun, more playtime. But the rescue element is going to need to rescue someone, or it's kind of all for naught. So the admin paradrops via this supply system we use a medical crate that we're able to go to. He takes some of the pressure off of us, which we don't know, and we're able to grab medical, get ourselves patched up, get ourselves supplied so we can take further hits and not be instantly dead, essentially. So getting to a medical crate like that, the things we're looking for as basic soldiers is we want morphine, which allows us to take the influence of pain and lessen that. We want bandages, so if we get hit again, we can stop the bleeding. We may take epinephrine pins, which are basically emergency medical supplies you can use. That if you take a hit that's so bad that it prevents you from actually running, Epi can give you a brief period of time where you can run. So it's kind of when things have gone completely to hell, that's your last ditch. Pop yourself with Epi and make a run for it, and you might make it.
Yep. Great. Yeah. a nice thing to see there. I think one of the other guys described it as the admin, the Zeus figure is almost like turning up the heat on the stove up and down.
Oh yes, definitely. The the job of the admin is it's the unsung hero from the perspective of people who are watching our videos from the the broader perspective of YouTube or whatever. Within our community, we know who they are, and after the mission, we'll tend to be talking. They'll be talking and kind of highlighting things that they saw, and we'll be highlighting things that we saw from them. But everything that happens in these kinds of scenarios is massively influenced by what the game master, the admin, is doing.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic where I think Ghostface was saying like some of these admin figures might be a little more sadistic, of course, just like a Dungeons and Dragon GM or something. But
all of our admins have their own different styles, which is cool to see. And the thing that's in common across all of them is that they take it very seriously. So there's no one that's just going in and doing something to be a dick or to have a laugh at other people's expense. The idea is that you're trying to make an experience that's as much fun for as many people as possible. And sometimes fun doesn't mean surviving. Sometimes fun is that you have this crazy scenario playing out and half or more of the players are now dead and in spectator, laughing with each other, watching everyone else try to get out, and usually rooting for the enemy at that point.
Totally. Yeah, it seems like a lot of responsibility, holding a lot of people's experiences in your hands. So yeah, let's fast forward a little bit to, if you could just briefly explain, I know it's very obvious to us, like, why is Charlie inserted in this mission, their general location, and what is their job as they enter the map again?
So Charlie's job here is basically just acting as an impromptu reinforcement element. They're given vehicles, they drive in, they're supposed to find the people that survived from that initial series of catastrophes, and then get those people out. And then in doing that and putting them back into play like that, it's not just about the admin making sure that those survivors have a chance. It's that those dead people now have another opportunity to play. And now it's not going to be as simple as them just driving in, grabbing us, and leaving. They're going to drive in, something horrible is going to happen again, because that's how we're fated to be. And then they'll have that experience of trying to get out themselves again. So it's basically taking a mission that, had it gone differently, they would have just done this extract organically as Alpha and Bravo. But since Alpha and Bravo got more or less annihilated, now they're back in as Charlie to do something that's slightly different, but is still tied into the original mission intent. And something that we can do on the fly, as need be, based upon whatever emerges from the scenario.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about it is like there's almost like an element of improvisation and creativity, because like, they could have come up with any number of kind of places or reasons or resources for Charlie to enter in, right? But this is what they came up with.
Right. We have a lot of administrative tools that are set up to where we can take a scenario that's going in any given way and then adapt to it easily, whether that's through the way we're controlling the enemy AI, the quantity of them, medical supplies, how reinforcements work, how reinforcements get to a battle. We can have people pair-dropped in automatically. We can have them driven in like this on their own. We can have them fly in, whatever. And we can set them up as whatever structure we want at the time as well. So if we didn't want to have this Speak Charlie, we could have had a Delta squad, or we could have a machine gun team, or whatever. We have a great deal of flexibility that allows us, on the fly to react to what's happening and make something fun from it.
Terrific. Okay, I'm going to come back to screen share. I'm about the 47:26 mark. So you guys finally get together with Charlie, and oh great, like what could possibly go wrong? This is your second rescue attempt. This one's going to work.
Of course.
And I got it playing here a little bit slowly, apologies, but as you're of course like fending off enemies, you're moving up the road, and there's a couple of vehicles that come down. I'm wondering if you could kind of just break down that encounter.
Sure, give me 1 second to get to this in the AR.
Yeah, no problem.
So the thing that ends up being really tricky here is that as we're running away, we have someone take a UAZ which is typically an enemy vehicle, and they come towards us and drive past. And we recognize that as being a friendly, so we don't shoot them. And then moments later, another UAZ shows up, and we have that question of, is this actually enemy or not? We don't know. And I have my AT-4 out. I'm ready to shoot if need be. But since I don't know if it's friend or foe, I can't take that shot because you can't take it back. So the second one ends up being actually an enemy, which drives right through our lines and finds Cappy and just punts him, however many meters, and just nearly obliterates him. So it was the unfortunate happenstance of someone doing something intelligent, which is taking an enemy vehicle and making sure that we can use it to get out, being followed by an actual enemy in the same vehicle, which we're unable to identify as such in time to stop it from, kicking Cappy along the road like a little rag doll.
Yeah. I mean, the timing of it is just really crazy and unfortunate. And you think, like, your instincts seem like you seem aware of definitely the possibility this could be an enemy vehicle. But as you say, right, like, I mean, what happens if you fire off that AT-4, right?
Right. If I were to take that shot and if that's a vehicle full of friendlies, then now we have, a UAZ like that can hold, I want to say, like 8 or 9 people. We could have a 9-person mass casualty event happen, which is going to mean this can take us another 10, 15 minutes to sort that out, and give the enemy 10 or 15 minutes to make sure that we don't sort that out.
And that's going to be so much paperwork.
Yes.
So I'd love to get your reflection. So Cappy's down. He's got an entire hospital's worth of injuries on him. Talk me through the decision-making process of, what you do with somebody in a state like this.
The fun thing about Cappy's state and my position in this scenario is that I didn't have to be the one to make that decision. I was able to allow other people in leadership positions to decide what to do with Cappy. And Bricks ended up deciding that, let's load him up in the UAZ and see if we can get him out of here. And my expectation was that, no, he was dead. He was very dead, and we should probably just leave him. But we put him in the UAZ and gave it a shot. The issue we tend to run into if someone takes that kind of debilitating list of injuries is that if we can heal them, and this is kind of a morbid way to look at it, but he has a ton of wounds. Is he worth expending that much of our limited medical supplies on? And the answer to that is sometimes no. And in this case, realistically, it was no. But at the same time, doing something because it's what you would want them to do. Well, most of the time it's what you would want them to do for you, and you want to have that fun collaborative experience. It's better to give them a chance than to just leave them to die.
It seems to me one of the biggest differences between, Call of Duty, it's almost not even a fair comparison, but like another video game and what you guys do is you're almost concerned with making the most interesting decisions rather than the greatest shortcut or you're not trying to score headshots every time you pull the trigger, right? Sometimes you're firing to create atmosphere for the guy next to you. Is that fair to say?
The way I would say that is typically in this kind of environment, we're very aware of what everyone else's experience is. So you might have this reflected as if you're a fire team leader and your fire team is not getting action, you might ask the squad leader or reposition your guys or give them some kind of task that allows them to do something instead of just sit there. And the same thing happens at all levels. If you're a platoon commander and you use one squad to assault and one squad to support the assault, the next time you have that opportunity to do an assault, you'll switch those around. Or you'll make sure that some other squad has that opportunity. So you want everyone to get a piece of the action. And then in situations like this where someone's heavily wounded, the gameplay that arises from tending to people and helping people is one of the best parts of Arma. It's one of the parts that's very lacking in the default game, but once modded like this, you have all kinds of opportunities to, drive this heavily injured person out or drag someone or carry them, pick them up and carry them out of the area. And it's just this very team-oriented, since you care about the people in your community, they're not random, people you'll never see again. There's some meaning, some connection between you and them that it just adds this extra layer on top of that, and it makes it really an exciting gameplay element.
Thanks for sharing that. So let's jump ahead a little bit to the next super fun moment where everything
One,
goes smoothly.
you want to hear
Yeah, go
one?
ahead.
So one thing
Yeah,
about that scenario
yeah,
that I didn't know at the time, and I had to use my AR system to find this out, is that as we're going in and loading up into our UAZs and preparing to drive out of there, a BTR 80, which is like an armored personnel carrier, drives up
right.
right behind us as we're leaving, and we have parts of Charlie that are back, behind us that are engaging this and trying to prevent it from stopping us as we leave. And it's just this cool example of like this happened less than 50 meters behind me, and I wasn't
Hmm.
very well aware of it until well after the fact.
Wow. Yeah, that's almost the inverse of what some of the other guys have told me, which is like, when you see one enemy at a tree line, you're like, oh, there's probably five behind them, or maybe there's 10, maybe there's a helicopter, maybe there's, two guys with RPGs, and like you're just sort of like, you don't know, especially in this sort of environment, right?
Certainly, it's a good survival trait to be paranoid.
Mm-hmm. So at this point in the video, I'm in your clip. I'm at 54, 55 minutes. You know, you've had, relatively speaking, you've had a respite. The road trip has resumed. Things are going fine. You're jabbing morphine in each other's faces down the road, but that's all good. And things are going swimmingly, but it seems like the admin had something in store for you up the road.
Yeah, one of the parts of driving out of an area is you don't want it to be completely uncontested. You want something interesting to happen. You don't want to be necessarily stomped on. You want the opportunity to make that escape, but you want it to be contested because it being contested is what adds the flavor to it. So in this situation, we had the admin had put some troops in an ambush position up along the road, which was more of a problem for the elements that were in front of us than us, although it became our problem after it was theirs.
Yeah, tell me what you make. We're going to see it here in a moment. Chris is the driver, and how would you evaluate Chris's decision making?
Given the situation that Chris was put into, I think that what he did was the right course of action. One of the things you want to do in any kind of vehicle ambush is you don't want to stop in the kill zone. And what we were seeing there with the destroyed vehicle and another vehicle being knocked out in front of us was that was a kill zone. Our objective, our mission at that time was to get Cappy out. Us being dead wouldn't get Cappy out. So Chris driving around them and driving through the ambush was definitely the right thing to do. Even though he allegedly may have hit someone as he did so, but they didn't make it out, so no one can really tell that story, can they?
There you go. I mean, it's just like a busy city street. Like, you got to check your mirrors before you step out into a freeway.
Absolutely. Look both ways before you jump out of your burning vehicle.
And I'm wondering if you have just a note on the threat of what I guess are RPGs, or just like from a tactical standpoint, like how did this ambush play out?
Let me check 1 second.
Yeah. If it's even fair to call it an ambush, I don't know.
Yeah, it certainly fits as an ambush. It was essentially an RPG team was sitting at one of the T junctions. So as MG Bates' vehicle came around into view of that, the RPG gunner engaged their vehicle, disabled it. The vehicle behind them, I'm not entirely sure what happened to them, but or rather, the vehicle behind them went around them on the right. We went around them on the left. Then the vehicle that had gone around on the right got hit by another RPG and stopped. And that was the one that we skirted on the left. So it was basically just a handful of troops that caused a huge disruption. And in knocking out those two vehicles, they fixed those people in place. They took away their transportation and then allowed larger enemy forces to converge on them.
And in this scenario, obviously, you're just dealing with what's in front of you in your own vehicle. But how do you make that decision between, well, do we go back for them? Are they alive? It's not like a normal FPS where you have like their name appear on the screen confirming whether they're dead.
In this kind of scenario, the decision as to whether you're going back or you're trying to stop them It's really complicated. It becomes one of those things you figure out over time. You get the sense for what different things are and what your ability to influence it is. In this one, the driving factor was the fact that we were on this rescue mission for Cappy, and stopping to try to help, we couldn't guarantee that we'd be able to drive again. So at that point, we had to believe in the Charlie members that were left in that ambush position and believe that they'd be able to handle it themselves and then catch up to us if they could. But it wasn't something where we had an opportunity to stop and lend a hand.
Yeah, tough calls to make, I'm sure. Stopping feels like death in that scenario.
Stopping is often death in that scenario, and sometimes it's slower than others. But it got all of them in the end. Like, none of them made it out.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the right one now with hindsight. So, so talk to me about how the mission kind of transitions into this final phase. You keep driving, you end up kind of looks like a base. How do you get set up there and get squared away for what's next?
So the thing about basically everything that's happened in the mission up to this point, after our initial, after the initial Alpha and Bravo being destroyed, this has all been very much improvised, both on our side as well as the admin side. So we eventually drive to an area that's like a little outpost in the middle of the jungle. And we don't know that we have any particular kind of air extract coming in, but we're requesting it. And the admin, seeing this, is able to take someone who had also died, who's a pilot, and say, hey, would you like to go fly in and try to extract these guys? And that's what he did. And for us, it was just a matter of trying to do the best we could to make a defensive position, make the best of the one that we were at, wait for other people to get to us, and then try to get out ourselves, establish some kind of contact with some kind of higher element like air or command, get them to us, and then just get out of there.
Great. So you found, maybe not the perfect defensive position, but at least something that perhaps can be defended better than a patch of grass. Can you give me sort of just a head count of who's left here for the audience, really, by name, and I guess like a little bit of play-by-play of like where you orient yourselves, if you could.
Sure. So as we arrive at this little outpost, there's trenches around the perimeter. There's some earthen embankments and stuff towards the center of it.
Yeah.
The people we have at this point, we have Chris, myself, Ghost Boots, Cappy, Robust Grains, and Night Defender. And that's a decent number of people to hold a position like this. So the thing we initially do is just try to get turned around and face in the direction we know the enemy was coming from. What ends up happening is we have a what we call technicals, which is basically any kind of light pickup truck type thing with a gun on it. We have a technical racing into the outpost. I hear it. I'm trying to pull out my AT to take a shot at it if I need to. And he just T-bones the UAZ. And in the UAZ are Cappy and Robust. And what we don't know in the chaos is that impact that knocks over that UAZ actually kills Cappy. So the whole point of all of this just died, and we don't even realize it. And then after that, what ends up happening is I believe Robust was wounded, and we weren't aware or we didn't have a means to treat him or something like that. So as Chris, Knight, Defender, Ghostweaves, and myself are going down to try to find another location to defend, Robust actually passes out and ends up dying behind us. And again, I don't think we were really aware of that just because of how much was going on at the time. So at that point, it's just the four of us, and we're basically just hoping that Air's going to get there in time.
I'm wondering if 3 years later you have any words that you give to Cappy after all that he went through on this mission.
Yeah, if I were to give Cappy any, further reflections after so much time, I would say that, if it had been up to me, we probably would have just left you behind. So we gave it a shot and it didn't work out, and that's just the joy of all of this. But, you know, I told him so.
And I mean, what about Chris's perspective from this point? It's really interesting to see it from your eyes because, again, you know, that vehicle impact, and I can't quite make sense of where Chris was and how he got out of there.
Let me check. I'm so glad that I made this AR thing. It is awesome for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So what happens to Chris is as I'm tracking the UAZ as it drives past, Chris has just gotten out and he's running. So he's going screen right. You just can't see him. He's past that berm. So he's basically directly right of where our overturned UAZ is.
Mm-hmm.
He's just behind a wall that we can't quite see.
So that probably would have played out differently if he was on the passenger side, I guess.
If when he got out on the passenger side, he probably would have gotten hit. It's hard to tell. Like it happened so fast. I'm not sure if either Robust or Cappy got out before it hit them. But anyone that was in the vehicle or on the right side of it was going to get creamed by that UAZ.
So certainly one of the themes of this mission is like just ridiculous vehicle encounters and violence. But again, like I wonder if you have anything to say about like your rocket trigger discipline.
Well, the thing about having anti-tank for us is that in some scenarios you know not to expect any armor. In others it's much more ambiguous, and in most of them you expect some kind of armor. So in this case, my AT4 is the only thing that's going to stop something like a BTR-80 or a BRDM or a similar vehicle. And since we're all just dismounted infantry without any kind of vehicle assets of substance ourselves, one of those things showing up with me having wasted my RPG on something, or my AT4 on something that didn't warrant it, is basically dooming us. We can shoot it at all we want, and we're not really going to do anything. So for me, each time I was bringing out my AT, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, this threat that's coming up that I haven't yet seen may be one of those armored vehicles. It may be a BRDM, it may be a BTR, or whatever. And this might be the thing that changes the tide for us here. But each time that I see that it's not, that I see it's just like a soft skin vehicle, like a UAZ tactical or whatever, I can't shoot, because if I shoot, I've put us in danger in the future.
Right. Tough decisions. You almost have to have a whole separate set of instincts as an Arma player versus like a general shooter player of just like kill on sight.
Right.
So I want to talk about the extract itself. Finally, it's kind of a final note here. Talk to me a little bit about the communication skill set and process for, like, you know, it's not like the pilot has a perfect waypoint and just, you know, land here, job done. How do you coordinate with somebody in a moment like this?
So if you're doing an extract, there's a ton of considerations you have to make as to what's important to communicate and what you can do on the ground to make it easier for the person in the air. So in this particular instance, one of the things that was helpful is that we're in a well-defined position. We were in an outpost that had a trench line running more or less all the way around it. We were in that trench. We could communicate that up to the pilot. We could also use simple cardinal directions to say that the enemy is on this side, and we're on this side. Can you help? And then I believe later on we threw smoke to mark. I don't recall exactly, but we can just say, hey, we're on the northern side of this position. Can you extract us? We need you to fire on the southern side, put your rockets on the southern side. That should clear up the contact for a moment and give you enough time to get down here and grab us. So then it's just the pilot being able to watch and see what's happening and integrate that information from the ground and then make a decision as to when they can do that extract safely, or as safely as they possibly can. So it's a skill set. The communication is a big factor, but the aptitude of the pilots is a very significant factor as well. And we hold our pilots to a very high standard. And in this case, it was Grim Zero, and he did a very good job of getting us out of there.
Yeah, I'd say. So I think at one point I'm trying to find it here in my view. Some rockets come down, and again, I mean, like in a movie, you just hear somebody call out danger close or something like that. But like, it's not like he's just like freewheeling up there, be like, oh, I guess I'm gonna throw some rockets down. Like, I'm guessing you guys probably called out to him, or how does that usually play out? How do you make sure you don't get blasted?
Well, in this kind of scenario, coordinating that kind of air support, getting their rockets on a target, is mostly a matter of just being able to tell them where you are and where you think the enemy is. So in this case, if we tell them that we're on the northern side of this outpost and the enemy's on the southern side, outside of the outpost, then that gives them a really good constraint. They can see how big the outpost is. They know how big the splash radius of those rockets are. They know what their accuracy is with those rockets. And that since they want to make sure that they're hitting things that are enemy and don't accidentally drop something on us, they can set up how they run in on a target to be a specific way. In this case, coming from west to east, so that even if one of the rockets goes a little bit further or a little bit shorter than they intended, that line never crosses through our position.
Yeah, that makes sense when you put it that way. So I know you've, I mean, guys, just like countless extracts. You fly a lot of helicopters on your channel, of course, and in missions. How would you rate this one on whatever scale that you give?
How would I rate this? I would put it up there as a very competent extract from a reasonably hot area. It's not one of the hottest extracts. Our perception at the time as the infantry was that things were probably a little worse than they actually were. I think the method used to pick us up, coming to a hover the way he did, was great. The speed at which he was able to come in after dropping the rockets meant that the enemy didn't really have time to recover. The amount of fire we were taking at the very last second, through large part Grimm's efforts, was reasonably low. So it like on an intensity scale, maybe like a 7, let's say.
I mean, you say 7, and like, of course, I'm sure that's accurate. But there's like some kind of explosion that goes off, like just as you're all kidding, and there's like maybe a rocket that flies. Like, am I seeing that correctly? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of danger there. Like, it's not a trivial extraction. The fact that a rocket barely missed, that's just fortune. But there are some aspects that make it a little bit easier and they make it a little bit less stressful. One is that we have only 4 people on the ground. We know where they all are. So the amount of time they have to stay on the ground for us is really short. The means in which they can do their own self-suppression by firing rockets before they land, they have very few restrictions. The area is reasonably clear. Where they're landing doesn't have any kind of, they don't have any tight obstructions they have to worry about. They have a lot of freedom in how they make this pickup. So it's a challenging thing that requires skill, but there are situations and circumstances that can make it much more difficult. That doesn't mean this is easy. It just means there can be more difficult things as well. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So thanks for the chronological walkthrough there. I think the only stuff I want to come back to is just, you reflecting on the community in general. We've had some really good comments from the group on those topics. But of course, you have a very unique perspective. And, I guess like what I'm interested in is like at this point, 14 years later, what do you get out of leading or organizing or just being with ShackTac, and like has that changed significantly from when you started it?
Well, not to be too pedantic about this, but it'll be 16 years in January.
I'm sorry. Apologies. Yes.
So what do I get out of it at this point?
Yeah, and has that changed at all? Are you getting something different out of it now than those 16 years ago?
That is quite a question. So after doing this for so long, for 15, almost 16 years, the way I approached it initially in my mindset and the ideas that I had for what the community would be and what it would represent and what it would do have evolved significantly over time for a lot of different reasons. Some of them being things like the game that we play and how it has evolved. Some of them being Something being how the community itself has evolved and how people have expressed what matters to them within the community. So we do a thing every year where we get feedback from everyone, candid feedback about what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, whether they want to see change and whatever. So having that feedback every year for 15 years has made it possible to see the patterns, the trends, the things that mean something versus the things that really are important but not influential. So just being able to watch how the interpersonal relationships change, what that sense of community does for people in their real lives has shifted the emphasis strongly towards making sure that the community is as healthy as possible, that we don't tolerate people who are intolerant, and that we just provide a space that's, calling it a safe space is perhaps oversimplifying it, but a place where people are looking out for each other, who care, who have compassion and empathy, and also play a game. Lots of games. Arma is just one of them.
Certainly.
And then as far as what I get out of it is just, it's playing, for me, primarily Arma, but also other things with Shack is an experience that I just can't get otherwise. There's expectations, or rather, there's things you know to expect. You know that if you're playing a game, that someone is not going to cheese it for their own benefit at the expense of everyone else. You know that it's a collaborative experience. Anything that requires trust or coordination, it's just an expectation. You know it's going to happen. If someone's vulnerable, you know that they're not going to be exploited. And that, just broadly speaking, not just in games, but just in general. We've had a lot of, I don't know what you call it, like, we've changed with the times. You know, we've seen new things arrive, new concerns. People have, like, there's a lot of identity-related things that have happened over the last X many years. And that's been a really interesting thing for us to experience, because we're just like, that's as normal for us. Like, that's your friends here.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're not judging you for that. We'll accept it. You're part of us. I know some people have joined us because of that, or they had a community, like we've had people who came out as trans in a prior community, and that community couldn't handle it. So they got a new start with us, and they've been here for quite a while. So seeing that kind of stuff, the real human element of it, has been extremely motivating.
Yeah. Certainly. Wow. Yeah, that really echoes what some of the other folks had shared. And I'm just curious, at this point, like, well, the thing that reminds me of, just like, you know, being a very, like, capital M military game, you know, ostensibly a simulation, I'm sure, like, of course, you get people who come in who are, like, really trying to, you know, embody certain aspects of that. And, you know, like, as someone who was in the Marines previously, like, whether that contrasts at all with your experience of being in the armed services, you know, like, you're almost creating a community that, like, do you agree or disagree, like, that, you know, has a slightly different set of values, perhaps, than what people think of when they think of the military, or their perception of it?
First, can you hear the background noise right now?
Not right now, no. I think it's being canceled.
Okay, great, cool.
Yeah, you're good.
So in forming Shack, one of the things that I initially it was very high on my mind, was taking the things that I had experienced in the Marines that I thought were really positive, which were things like esprit de corps, history, you know, looking out for each other, and that sort of thing, and making those core values of our community as well. So what we take from the military are those interpersonal aspects and those organizational things that allow it to be a strong community that self-reinforces, looks after itself, and can just go on essentially indefinitely, as long as the people are willing to shoulder that. Whereas if someone comes into something expecting a very military experience, they might have things like very formal rank structures and mimic aspects of the military that, as a prior military person, I don't want to experience ever again. So people that want that, there are communities for that. It's just not what we do.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. So I think that basically wraps everything. There's just a little bit of a punch list I have for a couple other things, and apologies if this is slightly stilted. I had all the guys actually came up very organically with the other ones where they just said the motto, and just say the motto for us.
You want me to explain the motto?
I'm sorry to say no, but I feel like we've actually got that.
Okay, no, that's great.
In abundance, thanks to Dyslexi.
Yeah, it's better if someone else is, because, of course, I'm going to say it in the best possible light.
Right.
So yeah, like this kind of scenario is just an embodiment of our motto, which is serious fun.
Terrific. And I don't know if you can recall the enemy faction that you're fighting in this scenario. Like, are they part of a particular fictional military? Do they have a name? Is there anything you can share about them? Yeah.
Did anyone else talk about this?
No.
Oh, damn it. It's too bad. They might not have remembered that this was an element of it. This was a part of an ongoing campaign that one of our mission makers made.
Oh.
So it's against this mastermind evil overlord named Monkey Barros.
Right.
And this is us doing an aspect of that. So it's basically his like syndicate henchmen that we're fighting in this. And we've had quite a few scenarios with this guy in it. Like we'll be assaulting an airfield trying to capture him, and he'll take off and get away. And it's like, oh, damn you, Monkey Barros. So this has been going on for a few years at least. And this is just another element of that kind of campaign.
It's funny. Ghost Boots. I think he understood that mission framework, but he also was like, yeah, but like the thing that we came up with the mission objective at the outset is we're downloading pornography for the guys back at base.
That's one interpretation. That's not quite what the mission briefing says, but that's one way to look at it, I suppose. Maybe that's what they told him to get him to go along with it.
We've all got to find our reasons to fight.
Yep.
Deep within us. And okay, I think the last thing I've got here for you is just, I also had the guys, because I think we'll have just this kind of like quick introduction where we just introduce everybody. And if you're able to give me in almost like name, rank, and serial number fashion, if you're willing to share your name or your call sign, your age, the squad you were in, and your role, however you would put that, just kind of as 4 things. So like, Evan, 36, I was an alpha and I was a medic. That sort of.
Let me double check. What was I? I think it was just a rifleman at the start.
Mm-hmm.
Let me quickly check in the AR to see something.
Of course.
So my name is Andrew Gluck. I go by Dyslexi and Shacktech. I'm 39, and I was in Alpha Squad as a rifleman.
Terrific. Yeah, that's great. That's really compact. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks so much for your patience and all your support on this. It's going to be really fun. Like I mentioned to you on Discord, we can follow up about exactly the other stuff we want to record. But you guys have given us like really fantastic material that I think just honestly displays who you are and what you're about. And I'm just glad we're able to kind of, show a very cool mission, but also like tell, like Chris was telling us about how being a Shacktech is like kind of given him life skills from his perspective on like communication.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, like in some pretty significant ways.
That's really cool.
There's another, can I do it? Can I say an off the record thing?
You may, yeah.
Okay.
Wow. No kidding. Uh-huh.
I find that to be really cool. Like that's quite a thing to have seen evolve.
That's really and again, especially it's not what you would maybe expect from milsim. Not, I know you guys don't necessarily think of yourselves as milsim exactly, but
yeah,
that's great. I'm happy to hear that. Well, hey, thanks again for all this. I'm so grateful for your collaboration. We can jump off now, and we'll talk more this week as we move forward with editing.
Cool. Sounds good.
Great. Thanks, Dyslexi. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us.
Of course. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.